Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Kiorkof, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 5 quarterback rankings for the 2020 fantasy football season. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about some matchups at the quarterback position, giving you guys some perspective as to which defenses are giving up the most points to opposing quarterbacks on a weekly basis thus far this season in a 4-point per passing touchdown format. Now, after that, we'll talk about my top 16 quarterback rankings, giving you guys some stats and perspectives and my own opinion as to why I think these top 16 quarterbacks should be the best plays for this upcoming week. Outside of that, I want to thank you guys for the incredible support. If you have not yet already, click that subscribe button, join the community. We're going to be creating fantasy football content here on the daily for the entirety of the season. There's many of you that watch these videos that have not yet subscribed yet, so make sure you do so. Outside of that, when you're down below in the comment section, make sure you click that like button. I really do appreciate you guys going down there, commenting. I appreciate the kind words. Clicking that like button really does help me out a lot. Also, outside of that, patreon.com/AndrewKiorkof. Information down in the description for those of you who are looking for extra content outside of the channel. Otherwise, timestamps is also in the description, and we're ready to go, shall we? All right, so let's start talking about some matchups at the quarterback position now that we've covered everything. The teams that are giving up the most points to opposing quarterbacks thus far this season on average for a 4-point per passing touchdown format, as of right now, stands as the Atlanta Falcons, the Seattle Seahawks, and the Cleveland Browns. Now, in two of those matchups, I'm willing to take advantage of it. Of course, Teddy Bridgewater playing against the Atlanta Falcons this week, that's a matchup I want to take advantage of, especially considering the fact that they're giving up 3.3 touchdowns per game on average, and Teddy Bridgewater is coming off of a game in which he scored 3 touchdowns against the Arizona Cardinals. So again, I think that matchup, the fact that that secondary has been beat up as much as they have, both corners, safeties, makes it that much easier to start Teddy Bridgewater with the offensive threats he has with Curtis Samuel, DJ Moore, and Robbie Anderson, of course. These are guys that absolutely could take the top off the defense at any given moment and score. Outside of that, the other matchup is the Seattle Seahawks playing against the Minnesota Vikings. I think Kirk Cousins and these two wide receivers that have been great for them, Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson, should be able to take advantage of the matchup and be able to at least give themselves the best possible chance of winning because, again, Seattle's defense has been pretty stout against the run. So if, in fact, it is put on the pressure of Kirk Cousins to win this game, I think he's capable of doing it, especially against that secondary who will be missing Jamal Adams for the second week in a row. Now, in terms of like the Cleveland Browns, I don't think Phillip Rivers is going to, be throwing 3 touchdowns. If he does, then that's a different, Phillip Rivers than we've seen all season long, and that'd be pretty much a surprise in my eyes. Outside of that, the Los Angeles Chargers, I think with what Tom Brady did to them this past week, Drew Brees should easily be able to do as well. Obviously, he'll still be missing Michael Thomas this week, so I don't really think that he's going to be able to just completely let loose on them and have a 5-touchdown game, but I think he'll still be a consistent play. The Miami Dolphins playing against Jimmy Garoppolo, maybe he's a great play. There's some players here like Jimmy Garoppolo playing against the Miami Dolphins. We have Daniel Jones playing against the Dallas Cowboys. And we have Justin Herbert playing against the New Orleans Saints. These are players that are available in your leagues right now, but we'll talk about in a little bit whether or not they're the best possible plays this upcoming week. Outside of that, I want to give you guys some perspective as to which defenses are giving up the least amount of points to opposing quarterbacks. As of right now, the Indianapolis Colts, Chicago Bears, Carolina Panthers, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the New York Giants. The New York Giants played pretty tough against Jared Goff, but I think, of course, Dak Prescott should be able to take advantage of it. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Chicago Bears, they play again tonight. I think both these quarterbacks should be decent, but again, Tampa Bay's defensive line really does get after opposing quarterbacks, and I don't know if this Chicago Bears offensive line is going to be able to stop JPP, Shaq Barrett, Ndamukong Suh, Vita Vea getting after them. I know that Khalil Mack getting after Tom Brady is definitely something to keep your eye on, but I think the pressure will be able to at least be somewhat handled by their offensive line. And of course, Tom Brady's always getting the ball out of his hands quickly, so it's making it tough on pass rushers to get after him. The Indianapolis Colts, again, they've been the best defense in the National Football League thus far. I don't think Baker Mayfield's going to have too great of a game against them, but we'll see how exactly the running game kind of imposes its will into the play action scheme. But then the Carolina Panthers, they're not giving up many points to opposing quarterbacks, mainly because, again, opposing teams just want to run the ball. Of course, unfortunately, the Arizona Cardinals really didn't get that memo last week that you had to run the ball against that team to win. But at least Kyler Murray got a couple, yards on the ground with his feet. But either way, just to kind of give you some perspective, you can pause this, check out what quarterback you have this week and how tough the matchup is. Regardless, we'll get into our top 16 quarterback rankings as of right now. Again, this video is going to probably be a little bit shorter than usual. I don't think I need to talk about starting your quarterback for 25 minutes straight. So I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. My number 1 this week, it is Russell Wilson. Shouldn't be a surprise. Right now, he's the number 2 quarterback in fantasy, only by 1 point less than Dak Prescott. Of course, Dak Prescott's having so many garbage time games. But this past week, Russell Wilson had a little bit of a regression. I did mention it. It may have jinxed him to an extent, but of course, you're not going to be throwing 4 to 5 touchdowns every single week. The Miami Dolphins game, it was a little bit more difficult for Russell Wilson than the other games. that he had earlier this season. But again, it also had to do with the fact that Chris Carson was stealing, touchdowns on the goal line, which he wasn't getting in weeks prior. He was going to, Tyler Lockett or Jacob Hollister on the goal line. And Russell Wilson was definitely benefiting from that. But now that it all starts to balance itself out, I still think this is a great matchup against Minnesota. Should be a great play this upcoming week. Patrick Mahomes is my number 2. I don't think playing against the Las Vegas Raiders is much difficult for Patrick Mahomes. The way that this offense is beginning to really look nowadays, with them getting more involvement out of Mecole Hardman and Tyreek Hill, having both those guys on the field at the same time with Travis Kelce, Sammy Watkins, this is an unstoppable offense. It's pretty much pick your poison. How do you want to lose? Because the fact that Clyde Edwards is also being able to get out of the backfield, make some plays here and there, and also the fact that the Las Vegas Raiders, they can't stop the run. So this is going to be, we're going to run the ball down your throat, then hit you with play action and really hurt you with our speedsters when you're trying to bite it on the run. This upcoming week, the Raiders got their hands pretty full for this matchup. Either way, Patrick Mahomes has been consistent. Though he had a little bit of struggles against the New England secondary, I still think he's going to be great this week. He's my number 2. Moving on to 3, we have ourselves Lamar Jackson. Now, the information surrounding Lamar Jackson is that he did not practice Wednesday or Thursday. That is a concerning sign to see because, again, you usually want your your starting quarterback to get the reps on the given week. You definitely want that. But playing against Cincinnati hasn't been a difficult thing for Lamar Jackson. Going back to 2018, 2019, he's always had fantastic games against them, especially on the ground. Now, this upcoming week, if in fact he is dealing with a knee injury and that's actually what's bothering him and it's a serious issue, running the ball is mainly where Lamar Jackson's found his value in the last couple of weeks. Again, 2 weeks ago against the Kansas City Chiefs, was not able to find anything through the air. 97 passing yards. This past week against the Washington football team, only had 190 passing yards. So again, unless he's getting it done through his work on the ground this past week, 7 rushing attempts for 53 yards and a rushing touchdown. If that doesn't end up like culminating and actually doing something for him, his fantasy stability is it's not going to be there. So hopefully he'll be ready. Hopefully he'll be healthy, because he should have a great matchup here. Mark Andrews always feasts against that defense, so Lamar Jackson start feeding him the ball more. Dak Prescott's my number 4. Again, Dak Prescott having a 502 passing yard game with 4 passing touchdowns for 38.28 fantasy points. That's not going to happen every week. I don't expect it. Sure, he's the number 1 quarterback in fantasy right now, has the most passing yards in the National Football League with 1,704 games. But these numbers, I mean, if you're going to play, pretty soft competition, I think they should be able to take advantage of it. I don't think the New York Giants are a defense in which Dak Prescott's going to be struggling against. I just think that they're going to want to get a little bit more involvement out of Ezekiel Elliott as the weeks progress. So hopefully they'll do that. Dak Prescott gets a little bit of a downgrade because, again, I don't think for majority of the second half he's going to be passing the ball every single down. They're going to be up for majority of this game in the first half and should be able to just ride and coast clear in the second. Moving on to Josh Allen, my number 5. Assuming they play this week, the Tennessee Titans matchup is a very favorable one. I don't think that defense is imposing their will on many offenses. I don't think the pressure is getting the opposing offenses, even with the addition of Clowney. But again, the Tennessee Titans are undermanned. I mean, they've got a lot of players on that COVID IR list, whether it's defense or offensively, so they're going to be undermanned. And I think that Josh Allen, the way that he's played consistently thus far this season, even without having to use his legs to find the extra yards here and there, he's been consistent through the air, throwing 288 passing yards last week. That was his lowest of the season. So they've been easily being able to just, ride it out. With John Brown potentially even more healthy this upcoming week, Cole Beasley finding himself more work in this offense, Stephon Diggs being consistent. I think this offensive line, even with, a couple of their starters taking injuries this offseason during the preseason, having surgery, I think Josh Allen's just been able to sit in the pocket and just do whatever he wants. Had a great passing completion percentage thus far this season. Should be great this upcoming week. Speaking of the Arizona Cardinals, we talked about them a little bit earlier, not getting the memo last week that you're supposed to run the ball on the Carolina Panthers. Here's the thing. There's a couple problems I have with this offense and kind of scares me when it comes to Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray only has 7 passing touchdowns thus far this season and 5 interceptions. Now, a lot of people may be thinking, well, how is he a top 6-7 quarterback on a weekly basis if he's not throwing touchdowns? It's mainly because he's running the ball a lot. The fact that he's averaging more than, 60 yards per game on the ground, that's kind of got him on pace for a 1,000-yard season. He already has 4 rushing touchdowns, and it's beginning to at least, go in the right direction for him on the ground, getting him more value there. But in terms of the passing game, last week, only 133 passing yards. He had 3 passing touchdowns because that secondary for the Carolina Panthers is not great. The defense is not great. So it should have been able to be an even easier matchup where he's airing it out more. Hopefully, you could take advantage of the New York Jets defense. Again, Brett Rippon last week was able to do it. Kyler Murray, get it going, man. We got to see more consistency. We don't want any of these games where you're only throwing for 133 and not getting DeAndre Hopkins involved. All right, we move on to our number 7 quarterback, Deshaun Watson. I think the Bill O'Brien era ending is going to give a little bit of life and energy into this team. Again, Deshaun Watson, 300 passing yards last week, had 2 passing touchdowns. Could have been 3 passing touchdowns on that final play of their offensive drive. Of course, the ball kind of forced the fumble there, but no big deal. I think against the Jacksonville Jaguars, a very favorable matchup. We saw Joe Burrow pretty much impose his will with 300 passing yards against them. And obviously, Joe Burrow was able to get Mixon involved a little bit more. But again, I think this is a this is a pass first offense. They just got to find their number 2 receiving option. I know Will Fuller's number 1, but you got to figure out whether it's Stills, Cobb, or Cooks. One of them's got to step up, and hopefully they do this week. And as the time goes on, Deshaun Watson should be a good play. Moving on to number 8, Ben Roethlisberger. Again, had a bye week last week in Prom 2. Has really gotten himself into a rhythm this year. Is averaging about 20 fantasy points per game in a 4-point per passing touchdown format. This upcoming week takes on the Philadelphia Eagles secondary. I'm not worried about it at all. They've had a couple weeks to prepare for this team now that they know, especially last week, that their game's getting canceled. Start preparing for the Eagles. They went ahead. They did so. So that a couple days of rest and a couple days to prepare for this team should be a great matchup. And I think the secondary, not really too excited. They're going to have their hands full with all the receiving options of Juju, Deontay Johnson, of course, and Eric Ebron coming at them this week. Moving on to our next play, we have ourselves Matt Ryan. So Matt Ryan is my number 9. Again, like I was mentioning with Kyler Murray, Carolina Panthers secondary should be an easy matchup every single week. If Kyler Murray can throw that many passing touchdowns, sure, it's not going to matter the yardage because Matt Ryan's always going to be airing it out. Now, whether or not Julio is there, I'm not really too concerned. I know Matt Ryan struggled heavily this past Monday night against the Green Bay Packers, but that was mainly because his receiving core just wasn't there. There was no Julio, there was no Calvin Ridley. Hopefully, Russell Gage starts to step up. Zaccheaus, maybe we get ourselves a little bit of production out of Hayden Hurst. Maybe wake up, Hayden. It's time to step up and figure it out. I think Matt Ryan will be fine. This is a matchup within the NFC South. These are usually shootouts, and hopefully this upcoming week, a back and forth between these two teams kind of lights a fire under his ass and gets him going in the right direction. Our number 10, we have ourselves Drew Brees. Again, if Tom Brady's going to throw 5 passing touchdowns against this Los Angeles Chargers secondary, and a lot of teams are being able to at least score on them pretty relatively easily, I think there's a good chance that Drew Brees, even without Michael Thomas, finds himself having value with Traquan Smith and Emmanuel Sanders. Of course, Alvin Kamara is basically Drew Brees' best friend in terms of the offense. That is his check down. That is his safety blanket. It's just give him the ball and let him do the work. I don't even have to slip it in between the 2 defenders. I don't got to aim for the back shoulder. I'm just dumping it off and letting him work. Hopefully it gets a little bit more work this upcoming week. In terms of the matchup, again, Alvin Kamara is always one of the best running backs because of that ability in the passing game. But again, I still think Drew Brees should have himself a pretty good week in week 5. Teddy Bridgewater is our number 11. Again, a lot of these NFC South quarterbacks are being named today because, again, they have offenses that are capable of scoring. And in a matchup against the Atlanta Falcons, the worst secondary right now in the National Football League, giving up the most points to opposing quarterbacks, Teddy Bridgewater coming off a great week in which he had 276 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 6 rushes for 32 yards, and a touchdown, makes me think Teddy Bridgewater's got a little bit of momentum, a little bit of juice going into this upcoming week. Hopefully the offense around him is starting to feel themselves. Hopefully that they find their footing now. Teddy Bridgewater can come, play a pretty good game against Atlanta, have himself a back and forth shootout. This is a guy that I mentioned on the waiver wire earlier this week. Guy that you could potentially pick up and stream this week if you are missing Aaron Rodgers or Matthew Stafford. I think Bridgewater is a great play at number 11. Number 12, we have ourselves Kirk Cousins. Again, another one of these players that are going to be taking care of some very advantageous matchups. I think right now, Russell Wilson versus Kirk Cousins should be a pretty good back and forth. I know that Dalvin Cook took majority of his value away last week with all his rushing touchdowns, but the Seahawks have been pretty good against the run. And if in fact Kirk Cousins is having to throw the ball even more to Adam Thielen, Justin Jefferson, should end up being a pretty good play this week. I'm not over the moon excited about playing Kirk Cousins because, again, I know what kind of inconsistency he has shown over the last couple years. But I think in comparison to some of these other quarterbacks, he's got a pretty good advantage in terms of opportunity and receiving threats for him this upcoming week. We move on to number 13. We have ourselves Jared Goff. Jared Goff played really badly last week against the New York Giants. Should have had 300 passing yards and 2 passing touchdowns minimum. I'm 100% certain that Dak Prescott will be able to do that. But the question is, can Jared Goff produce against the Washington football team if, in fact, Chase Young is there and they're really sending a pass rush at him? Because that's where Jared Goff struggles the most. I still think that this offense has looked far better than they did last year, even without Gurley and this running back rotation. it's only a matter of time until we find ourselves more consistency with Jared Goff, but I'm pretty comfortable playing him this week against Washington. I think it's a pretty easy matchup. So as long as they take an early lead and continue to just hammer it out, I think it should be a pretty good game for him. The fact that Kyle Allen's on the other side could end up giving them more opportunities. The amount of interceptions that man has thrown just last season could give Jared Goff some extra field positions that he doesn't really need, but might end up leading to a couple extra points here and there. Moving on to Tom Brady, my number 14, another one of these, and the last NFC South quarterback. I think Brady against the Bears, even though it's a tougher matchup, he's going to step up. Again, I think Brady on Thursday Night Football is 8-0 in his career, something like that. Some crazy statistic. He's always been great. I know he doesn't have, LaShawn McCoy, doesn't have Godwin, doesn't have Watson, doesn't have O.J. Howard. He's going to step up. Brady is to go for a reason. He will be able to deliver in fantasy today. I expect the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to win, and I expect it to be on the back of Tom Brady and him being able to feed Scotty Miller, Gronk, and Mike Evans today. Moving on, we have ourselves on number 15, Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow is playing against Baltimore. Whether or not it's Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow's throwing the entire time, because if Joe Mixon starts getting stuffed here and there, which I don't expect him to fully get, dominated in terms of the running game. I do think that Joe Burrow is going to have to throw a lot today or on Sunday and end up finding T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd as much as possible. I know A.J. Green's dealing with a little bit of an injury. If he's healthy, that's great. You have more receiving options in this offense, more ability to just air it out. Drew Sample's getting himself more and more involved in this offense and as a consistent part. So hopefully Joe Burrow this week, another one of these great options, as a streamer that could potentially be available in your league. The last option for this week, Ryan Fitzpatrick. I love Ryan Fitzpatrick. The beard always wins. There was a little bit of a conversation earlier this week. Is Ryan Fitzpatrick going to be the starting quarterback, or are we going to move to Tua? To be honest, they said, and Brian Flores said, we're sticking with Ryan Fitzpatrick. He gives us the best chance of winning. If the 49ers secondary is still a little bit beat up, the fact that Philadelphia was able to score touchdowns last week against San Francisco makes me think that they're definitely struggling. They've been missing a lot of pieces, and Ryan Fitzpatrick will be able to take advantage of that, especially considering the amount of times he's going to throw the ball. I mean, he does not care. He'll throw it 40, 50, 60 times if he has to, and he's going to throw for a lot of yards. He'll get it done on the ground. I mean, last week, I think he had what? He had a rushing touchdown. He had 47 rushing yards and 6 rushing attempts. I mean, he had the most rushing yards on the team for that team last week. So, again, I think Ryan Fitzpatrick, somehow a playmaker, somehow still relevant in fantasy, as my number 16. It shouldn't be really much of a surprise for many of you. Either way, those are my top 16 quarterbacks. Later this afternoon, we'll be talking about tight ends. Make sure you check that out. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And until next time, I appreciate it. Subscribe to the channel, click the like button, and I'll see you guys. Peace.